A decorated police officer just destroyed his entire career by lying under oath about the wrong person, someone who had the power to send him to federal prison. Officer Ryan Carter's voice echoed through the cramped municipal courtroom as he aimed his finger straight at Dr. Maya Richardson. "This suspect became violent and aggressive, Your Honor," he declared with practiced authority. "She used threatening language and attempted to assault me during a lawful traffic stop." Maya remained composed in her seat, her leather portfolio resting beside her feet, as she observed him weave a tapestry of fabrications with theatrical precision. "The accused believes her economic privilege grants her immunity from consequences," Carter pressed on, his expression radiating false righteousness. "She made direct threats against my safety and claimed connections to criminal organizations." The assistant district attorney smiled approvingly. Observers in the gallery nodded their heads. Judge Morrison jotted down notes, appearing persuaded by the decorated veteran's sworn account. But Carter's entire testimony was manufactured fiction, deliberate lies crafted to ruin an innocent person's reputation. What this dishonest officer failed to realize was that his target held federal credentials that exceeded his authority. Have you ever witnessed someone commit professional suicide in a court of law? The room was filled beyond capacity, anticipation hanging thick as Officer Carter straightened his pristine uniform and raised his right hand on the sacred text. His years of commendations gleamed beneath the harsh overhead lighting as he vowed to speak truth without deception. "Officer Carter," the prosecutor launched with rehearsed confidence, "please describe the incident that occurred on the evening of March 20th. Carter exhaled deliberately and fixed his gaze upon the jury with the assurance of someone who had recited this narrative countless times. "I was performing standard speed enforcement on Jefferson Boulevard when I noticed the accused's automobile exceeding the posted limit in a residential zone. Routine procedure, Your Honor." He paused strategically, scanning faces throughout the chamber before proceeding. "Upon initiating the lawful stop, the accused immediately displayed hostile and uncooperative behavior. She declined to produce her documentation when formally requested." From the defense table, Maya maintained flawless composure, making precise annotations on her government-issued device. Her specialized training had prepared her to record everything, especially perjured statements delivered under oath. "Did the accused follow your lawful instructions?" the prosecutor prompted carefully. "Absolutely not," Carter responded, his tone growing increasingly dramatic. "She escalated her aggression, using vulgar language and issuing direct threats to my personal safety. She repeatedly reached toward her front compartment despite numerous warnings to maintain visible hand placement." The first substantial lie. Maya's pen moved methodically across her notepad, capturing each false claim with the exactness of someone experienced in federal interrogations. Truth leaves evidence, lies leave contradictions. "At what moment did you perceive a genuine safety threat?" The prosecutor continued his questioning. Carter leaned forward with calculated emphasis. "When she lunged toward what appeared to be a dangerous weapon inside her automobile, I had zero alternative but to implement defensive protocols. The accused clearly intended to transform this encounter into a violent situation." Whispered conversations rippled across the spectator section. Several jury members repositioned themselves uncomfortably, their faces growing stern as they absorbed the officer's dramatic account. "Did the accused make statements that alarmed you?" "Affirmative, counselor." Carter nodded with grave sincerity. "She insisted she possessed influential connections who would, her exact words, ruin my existence for conducting this traffic enforcement. She stated individuals like me wouldn't maintain employment much longer and referenced powerful allies capable of destroying my profession." Another complete invention. Maya's federal system access would subsequently demonstrate that no such dialogue ever occurred, yet Carter delivered each fabrication with award-caliber conviction. "Officer Carter," the prosecutor paused for maximum impact, "in your 15 years of police work, Have you experienced this degree of antagonism during routine enforcement? Never approaching this intensity, Carter responded solemnly. The accused's conduct was extraordinary. She appeared to believe her financial status somehow elevated her above legal accountability. The fabrications continued flowing like water through broken infrastructure. Carter painted a confrontation existing solely in his fabricated memory, portraying Maya as an entitled, dangerous offender who had attacked a devoted public servant merely performing his duties. "What occurred with your body-worn recording equipment during this incident?" the prosecutor inquired. Carter's expression shifted to apologetic. Regrettably, a technical failure affected the recording system. These malfunctions occasionally happen with electronic devices, particularly during stressful encounters. The equipment seemed operational, but subsequent review revealed the data file was corrupted. How remarkably convenient. Maya made another notation, her expression unchanging despite the obvious evidence manipulation. "Officer Carter, describe the accused's demeanor when additional units arrived at the scene." "She instantly modified her behavior," Carter replied with practiced timing. "Suddenly, she presented as calm and compliant, attempting to portray herself as the victim. Textbook manipulative conduct. She even possessed the audacity to claim I had behaved unprofessionally when reality proved quite opposite." Carter's colleague, Officer Thompson, sat among the observers, affirming every word with supportive nods, offering silent validation of the fabricated account. The two had obviously rehearsed this performance carefully. "In your expert assessment, was this a legitimate enforcement action that escalated due to the accused's actions?" "Without question," Carter answered without hesitation. "I adhered to all established protocols and procedures. The accused's aggressive conduct and apparent contempt for law enforcement created a hazardous situation that could have resulted in serious harm to myself or innocent community members." The prosecutor smiled with evident satisfaction. "No additional questions, Your Honor." As Carter departed the witness chair, he briefly met Maya's eyes and smirked subtly, the expression of someone convinced he had just delivered a perfect performance. His confidence was unmistakable as he returned to his position, certain that his 15 years of service and unblemished record would prevail today. The defense counsel, a young attorney named Jennifer Cole, appeared overwhelmed by Carter's weighty testimony. She shuffled documents nervously, visibly struggling to formulate responses to such seemingly credible allegations from a decorated officer. But Maya remained perfectly controlled, her specialized training evident in every measured breath. She had investigated corrupt officials previously and recognized the characteristic signs of false testimony. Carter's account was excessively polished, excessively detailed, excessively convenient. Authentic police encounters were chaotic and unpredictable. This testimony sounded committee-crafted. What Carter failed to comprehend was that his entire performance had been observed by someone possessing federal authority to prosecute perjury. Every lie, every fabrication, every intentionally false statement would soon transform into evidence in a substantially larger case concerning systematic corruption and constitutional violations. The prosecutor concluded his case with visible confidence, certain that Officer Carter's persuasive testimony had determined Maya's fate. The gallery buzzed with hushed discussions about the dangerous accused and the heroic officer who had risked his safety protecting the community. Carter adjusted his uniform one final time and settled into his chair, completely oblivious that he had just committed numerous felonies before a federal law enforcement officer possessing evidence to destroy not merely his career, but his liberty. The foundation was established for a revelation that would transform this small municipal courtroom drama into a federal case study of police corruption and the abuse of sworn testimony. The defense calls Dr. Maya Richardson to testify. The courtroom fell into silence as Maya rose from her position, her movements intentional and controlled. She carried herself with quiet confidence, characteristic of someone accustomed to high-stakes testimony, her government portfolio remaining at the defense table as she approached the witness stand. The court officer administered the oath with routine efficiency. "Do you swear to speak the truth, the complete truth, and nothing but the truth?" "So help you God." "I do," Maya replied, her voice clear and steady. Something in her tone caused several jurors to straighten their posture, an authority that seemed to permeate the room, despite her measured delivery. Jennifer Cole, the defense attorney, approached with visible nervousness. "Dr. Richardson, can you explain what actually transpired on the evening of March 20th? Maya's eyes surveyed the courtroom with the practiced observation of someone experienced in federal proceedings. "Officer Carter's testimony contains numerous material falsehoods delivered under oath," she began, causing commotion in the spectator section. "I will now provide this court with an accurate account of the actual events." The prosecutor objected immediately. "Your Honor, the accused is drawing legal conclusions rather than presenting facts." "Overruled," Judge Morrison responded, leaning forward with clear interest. "The witness may proceed." Maya nodded respectfully. "At approximately 8:45 p.m., I was traveling southbound on Jefferson Boulevard at 25 miles per hour, the designated speed limit. I was returning from a professional conference regarding federal oversight procedures for local law enforcement departments." The precision of her language captured Carter's attention. He shifted uncomfortably in his position, something about her professional terminology striking him as unusual for a typical accused person. "Officer Carter initiated an enforcement stop without reasonable suspicion," Maya continued with clinical exactness. "I immediately pulled to the roadside, deactivated my engine, and positioned my hands on the steering apparatus in clear view. Standard procedure for any law enforcement interaction." "What happened when Officer Carter approached your automobile?" Jennifer asked. "Initially, the interaction proceeded according to protocol. I provided my operator's license, vehicle documentation, and insurance verification when requested. However, Officer Carter's demeanor shifted dramatically when he examined my identification." Maya paused, her expression remaining perfectly neutral. "When he observed my residential address, indicating I live in an affluent community, his entire approach transformed. He began making comments about individuals like me and questioned how I could afford to reside where I do." Carter's jaw tightened visibly. Her recollection was uncomfortably precise, though he hadn't anticipated her remembering their exchange with such detail. "Can you describe Officer Carter's specific conduct?" the defense attorney prompted. "He began engaging in what federal civil rights protocols classify as pretextual harassment," Maya replied, causing the prosecutor to object again. "Your Honor, the accused keeps referencing federal protocols. What credentials does she possess to cite such authorities?" Judge Morrison looked curious. "Miss Richardson, what is your professional background?" "I possess a doctorate in criminal justice administration and extensive experience with federal law enforcement oversight procedures," Maya answered smoothly. "I've provided expert testimony in federal court proceedings involving constitutional violations." The courtroom buzzed with whispered exchanges. This was clearly not the typical accused they had anticipated encountering. Jennifer Cole pressed forward. "What did Officer Carter say to you during the stop?" "He asked how someone like me could afford to live in that community. When I politely declined to answer questions unrelated to the traffic enforcement, he became increasingly hostile. He stated that individuals from my demographic background needed to learn respect for authority." Carter's face was growing crimson. Her testimony was devastatingly accurate, but he had counted on his word against hers. Officer versus offender. He hadn't anticipated facing someone who spoke like a federal prosecutor. "Did you make any of the statements Officer Carter described?" Jennifer asked. "Absolutely not," Maya replied firmly. "I remained seated throughout the encounter with my hands visible at all times. I spoke respectfully and issued no threats whatsoever. I did not reach for any objects, nor did I attempt to exit my vehicle. These allegations are demonstrably false. How can you be so certain about these specific details? Maya's expression remained composed, but something almost knowing appeared in her eyes. I've been trained to observe and document interactions with law enforcement personnel. Professional habit, you might say. The prosecutor stood for cross-examination, clearly hoping to disturb her composure. Miss Richardson, isn't it convenient that your version of events contradicts Officer Carter's testimony in every detail? Truth often contradicts lies, Counselor, Maya replied evenly. That's the fundamental nature of perjury. Perjury doesn't hide from evidence. It collapses beneath it. Objection, the prosecutor shouted. The accused is accusing a sworn officer of perjury. Sustained, Judge Morrison ruled, but his expression suggested he was noting Kesha's unusual command of legal terminology. The prosecutor tried again. Do you possess any evidence to support your claims against Officer Carter? Maya paused momentarily, her eyes meeting Carter's across the courtroom. I have documented this interaction using methods consistent with federal evidence collection protocols. When the appropriate moment arrives, I will present that documentation to this court. Carter felt a chill travel down his spine. Something about her calm confidence unsettled him profoundly. Normal accused persons were nervous, angry, or desperate. This woman spoke like someone holding all the advantages. Dr. Richardson, the prosecutor pressed, you seem remarkably well-versed in legal procedures for someone facing criminal charges. I've had extensive professional exposure to the criminal justice system, Maya replied. I understand the importance of accurate testimony and the serious consequences of providing false statements under oath. As she spoke, Maya's eyes moved to her portfolio at the defense table. Inside were federal case documents, Department of Justice credentials, and evidence that would soon transform this local courtroom into the center of a federal constitutional violations investigation. No additional questions, the prosecutor concluded, clearly frustrated by his inability to shake her testimony. As Maya returned to her position, Carter watched her with growing unease. Something about this woman was different, dangerous even. She spoke with the authority of someone who had investigated cases rather than defended against them. What he didn't know was that Dr. Maya Richardson had spent the previous 2 years conducting undercover investigations of police departments across the region. Her traffic stop wasn't a random misfortune, it was federal evidence collection in action. The real trial was just beginning. The evening light filtered through the windows of Maya's home office as she methodically arranged federal case documents across her oak desk. The walls displayed law enforcement certifications, Department of Justice commendations, and photographs from constitutional rights conferences, a professional sanctuary few people had ever witnessed. Her son, Marcus, 17 and sharp as his mother, knocked softly on the door. Mom, you've been working in here for hours. Everything okay? Maya looked up from a thick folder marked Confidential DOJ Civil Rights Division and smiled wearily. Just preparing for tomorrow's court appearance, sweetheart. The case where that cop lied about you. Marcus's voice carried the indignation of youth. He had inherited his mother's sense of justice along with her intelligence. Among other things, Maya replied, pulling up Carter's file on her secure government laptop. Sometimes exposing systematic lies becomes your job, and tomorrow is one of those days. Marcus perched on the edge of the desk, careful not to disturb the carefully organized documents. What do you mean? Maya gestured to the files spread before her. Officer Carter thinks he lied about some random black woman who got confrontational during a traffic stop. What he doesn't realize is that he committed perjury against a federal law enforcement officer conducting an official investigation. The laptop screen displayed Carter's personnel record, 15 years of service, dozens of commendations, and buried deep in the digital archives, 49 complaints that had been mysteriously dismissed or downgraded. Maya had spent months accessing federal databases, cross-referencing incident reports, and building an airtight case against systematic corruption. "Is he going to prison?" Marcus asked, studying the evidence with the analytical mind his mother had fostered. "Perjury is a felony, sweetheart. But more importantly, his lies in court tomorrow will become evidence in a much larger federal investigation." Maya pulled out another file, this one containing video footage from surveillance cameras, body cam data recovered from federal servers, and witness statements from Carter's previous encounters. Her phone buzzed with a text from her DOJ supervisor. "Evidence package approved for court presentation. Authorization code follows." Maya opened her secure portfolio and began loading it with the tools of federal prosecution. Her Department of Justice credentials sat in a leather wallet next to federal subpoena forms and constitutional violation documentation. Each item represented years of training and the full authority of the United States government. "Mom," Marcus said quietly, "are you scared?" Maya paused in her preparation. Nervous, perhaps, but not scared. "I've investigated corrupt officials in federal court before, and I've seen what happens when people abuse their power systematically. Tomorrow, Carter's lies will catch up with him in ways he never imagined." She pulled up a video file on her laptop, security footage from the convenience store near where Carter had stopped her. The timestamp showed the entire encounter, contradicting every single element of his sworn testimony. But this was just the beginning. "The beautiful thing about federal investigations," Maya explained to her son, "is that we have resources local courts don't. When Carter claimed his body camera malfunctioned, he didn't know that federal oversight protocols require backup recording systems. When he thought he could lie without consequences, he didn't realize that constitutional violations are federal crimes." Maya's desk phone rang, her direct line to DOJ headquarters. "Dr. Richardson, this is Director Chen. Are you ready for tomorrow's revelation?" "The evidence is ironclad," Maya replied. "Carter's perjury is documented, his pattern of constitutional violations is established, and his department's systematic cover-ups are fully exposed. When I present my credentials tomorrow, this small municipal courtroom is going to become the center of a federal civil rights case." Marcus listened in amazement as his mother discussed prosecution strategies with federal officials. This was a side of his mother he rarely saw, not just the caring parent, but the federal law enforcement officer who had dedicated her career to fighting systemic injustice. After ending the call, Maya closed her portfolio with finality. "Tomorrow, Marcus, you're going to see what happens when someone commits perjury against a federal inspector. Carter thinks he destroyed some random woman's credibility. Instead, he just handed us the evidence we needed to dismantle his entire department's culture of corruption." "Will you be safe?" Marcus asked, genuine concern in his voice. Maya smiled with quiet confidence. "Sweetheart, I carry the full authority of the Department of Justice. Carter is about to learn that some fights choose you, and tomorrow, federal accountability chooses him." As mother and son headed downstairs for dinner, Maya's portfolio sat ready by the door, containing not just her defense, but Carter's destruction. The morning sun streamed through the courthouse windows as court reconvened, the gallery packed with curious spectators who had heard rumors about the previous day's unusual testimony. Judge Morrison called the session to order, his expression suggesting he expected this case to take an interesting turn. "Your Honor," Jennifer Cole announced with newfound confidence, "the defense calls Mr. David Chen to testify." A nervous-looking Asian man in his 50s approached the witness stand, adjusting his glasses as he was sworn in. Carter shifted uncomfortably in his seat, not recognizing the witness but sensing potential trouble. "Mr. Chen, please state your occupation for the record," Jennifer began. "I own Chen Electronics on Jefferson Boulevard, approximately 60 yards from where the alleged incident occurred on March 20th, he replied in accented but clear English. The prosecutor objected immediately. "Your Honor, we weren't provided notice of this witness. The defense discovered this evidence only yesterday, Jennifer responded. Mr. Chen has security footage that directly contradicts Officer Carter's sworn testimony. Judge Morrison leaned forward with obvious interest. I'll allow it. Please continue. Maya watched from the defendant's table, her federal training evident in how she observed every detail of the unfolding drama. She had spent years building cases based on evidence just like this. Mr. Chen, do you have security cameras on your property? Jennifer asked. Yes, 4 high-definition cameras with audio recording capability. They cover the entire street frontage, including the area where the traffic stop occurred. The system records continuously and stores footage for 90 days. Carter's face went pale. In his 15 years of fabricating reports, he had never considered that independent surveillance might exist beyond the police department's control. Did you review the footage from March 20th? Yes. After I heard about the case on the local news, what I observed made me very concerned about Officer Carter's testimony. The prosecutor stood quickly. Objection. The witness cannot comment on testimony he wasn't present to hear. Sustained, Judge Morrison ruled. Mr. Chen, please limit your testimony to what you observed. Jennifer approached with a tablet. Your Honor, the defense would like to present Exhibit A, security footage from Mr. Chen's surveillance system. The courtroom's large monitor flickered to life, showing a clear view of Jefferson Boulevard on the evening in question. The timestamp read 8:46 p.m. as Maya's sedan pulled over after Carter's patrol car activated its emergency lights. Mr. Chen, please describe what the footage shows, Jennifer instructed. The black woman, the defendant, immediately stops her car and turns off the engine. She places both hands on the steering wheel, where they remain visible throughout the encounter. On screen, the footage confirmed his testimony. Maya sat perfectly still in her driver's seat, her hands never moving from the wheel except to retrieve documents when requested. Carter squirmed as his lies began unraveling in real time. What happens when Officer Carter approaches the vehicle? Jennifer continued. At first, everything appears normal. He asks for documents and she provides them calmly. But then, Chen paused, pointing at the screen. You can see his body language change completely when he looks at her license. The footage captured the exact moment Carter's demeanor shifted, his posture becoming aggressive, his gestures increasingly hostile. Does the defendant ever reach toward her glove compartment in a threatening manner, as Officer Carter testified? Absolutely not, Chen replied firmly. Her hands never leave the steering wheel except to hand him her documents. She never makes any sudden movements. The prosecutor objected frantically. Your Honor, this witness is characterizing the defendant's movements rather than simply describing them. Overruled, Judge Morrison replied, clearly fascinated by the unfolding contradiction. The witness may describe what he observed. Jennifer pressed forward. Mr. Chen, your security system records audio as well. Did you hear the conversation between Officer Carter and Dr. Richardson? Yes, and it was very disturbing. Officer Carter made several inappropriate comments about where she lived and how she could afford her address. He became increasingly hostile without any provocation from the defendant. The audio crackled to life through the courtroom speakers. Carter's voice was clearly audible. How does someone like you afford to live in that community? People from your demographic background need to learn respect for authority. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Several jurors looked shocked at the obvious racial undertones in Carter's comments. Did the defendant make any threats against Officer Carter as he testified under oath? Jennifer asked. None whatsoever. She remained completely calm and respectful throughout the entire encounter. She said yes, sir, and no, sir, consistently. Carter's lies were crumbling before his eyes. What he had described as a violent confrontation was revealed as professional harassment of an innocent citizen. Mr. Chen, in the footage, does the defendant appear to be under the influence of drugs or alcohol? Not at all. She speaks clearly and follows all instructions immediately. Her behavior is completely cooperative. Jennifer paused for effect. Mr. Chen, based on what you observed, would you say Officer Carter's sworn testimony accurately described what happened that evening? The prosecutor objected, but Judge Morrison allowed the question. Officer Carter lied, Chen stated simply. Everything he said under oath was false. The defendant never threatened him, never reached for anything, never became aggressive. She was the victim of harassment, not the aggressor. As the footage continued playing, the contrast between Carter's fabricated testimony and the recorded reality became undeniable. The dangerous criminal he had described was revealed as a composed, professional woman being systematically harassed by a corrupt officer. Your Honor, Jennifer announced, the defense calls Mrs. Eleanor Davis to testify. An elderly black woman approached the witness stand with dignity despite her obvious nervousness. Carter's eyes widened in recognition, another ghost from his past coming back to haunt him. Mrs. Davis, Jennifer began, have you had any previous encounters with Officer Carter? Yes, ma'am. Last August, he stopped me outside my church and treated me terribly. Made the same kinds of comments about how I didn't belong in certain neighborhoods. The prosecutor objected to relevance, but Judge Morrison overruled him. I'll allow testimony about Officer Carter's pattern of behavior. Did Officer Carter file an accurate report about your encounter? Jennifer asked. Lord, no, Mrs. Davis replied with surprising steel in her voice. He wrote that I was belligerent and threatening, just like he said about this young lady. But the church security cameras showed I never raised my voice or made any threatening gestures. Pure lies, every word. As witness after witness took the stand, a clear pattern emerged. Carter had been filing false reports for years, systematically targeting black citizens and fabricating evidence to justify his harassment. In the defendant's seat, Maya took careful notes on her government tablet, documenting each revelation with the precision of a federal prosecutor building a constitutional rights case. Carter had no idea that his perjury was being recorded by someone with the authority to turn his lies into federal charges. The prosecution's case was disintegrating, but the real earthquake was still coming. Judge Morrison called for a brief recess as the implications of the contradictory evidence settled over the courtroom. When the court reconvened, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Carter sat rigid in his chair, sweat beading on his forehead as his fabricated testimony crumbled around him. Your Honor, Judge Morrison began, given the substantial contradictions between Officer Carter's sworn testimony and the independent evidence presented, this court has serious concerns about potential perjury. Before we proceed, I want to allow both parties to address these discrepancies. The prosecutor stood nervously. Your Honor, Officer Carter stands by his testimony. Perhaps the surveillance footage doesn't capture all angles of the incident. Jennifer Cole rose with newfound confidence. Your Honor, the defense has additional evidence that will conclusively demonstrate Officer Carter committed perjury. However, this evidence requires a disclosure that will fundamentally change the nature of these proceedings. Judge Morrison leaned forward with interest. What kind of disclosure, counselor? Jennifer looked at Maya, who nodded and stood with quiet authority. The entire courtroom held its breath as she approached her portfolio and retrieved a leather credential wallet. Your Honor, Maya said, her voice carrying a new gravity that filled the courtroom, I need to present federal evidence and disclose my true identity for the record. She opened the wallet and held up her credentials for the court to see. Dr. Maya Richardson, Senior Inspector, Civil Rights Division, United States Department of Justice. The courtroom erupted. Gasps echoed from the gallery. The prosecutor's mouth fell open. Several jurors sat back in shock. But no one reacted more dramatically than Officer Carter, whose face drained of all color as the magnitude of his situation crashed down on him. Federal Inspector, Judge Morrison repeated, clearly stunned. Dr. Richardson, are you testifying that you are a federal law enforcement officer? Yes, Your Honor. I hold federal law enforcement authority and have been conducting an undercover constitutional rights investigation of this police department for the past 20 months. Carter felt the world spinning around him. He had just committed multiple acts of perjury against a federal officer in federal court under oath on the record. Your Honor, Maya continued with clinical precision, what Officer Carter characterized as a routine traffic stop was actually documented evidence collection in a federal civil rights investigation. Every aspect of our interaction was recorded using federal surveillance protocols. She approached the bench and handed Judge Morrison a thick folder. This contains my federal credentials, authorization for the investigation, and documentation proving that Officer Carter's entire testimony constitutes perjury in a federal civil rights case. The prosecutor looked like he might faint. Your Honor, we did not know that the defendant was a federal officer, because I was operating undercover as authorized by federal civil rights statutes, Maya replied smoothly. Officer Carter's traffic stop of my vehicle, his subsequent harassment, and now his perjured testimony are all evidence in a systematic investigation of constitutional violations by this police department. Judge Morrison studied the credentials carefully. Dr. Richardson, these appear to be authentic federal law enforcement identification. Are you stating that Officer Carter has committed perjury against a federal inspector? That is exactly what I'm stating, Your Honor. Officer Carter has knowingly provided false testimony under oath regarding his interaction with a federal law enforcement officer conducting an official investigation. Carter's lawyer whispered frantically in his ear, but Carter could barely hear him over the roaring in his head. He had destroyed his own career, committed multiple felonies, and handed the federal government ironclad evidence of his corruption. Furthermore, Maya continued, the federal investigation has documented a pattern of similar constitutional violations by Officer Carter spanning 4 years. His perjury today is consistent with false reports he has filed in 49 previous cases involving black citizens. The gallery buzzed with shocked conversations. Local reporters frantically scribbled notes realizing they were witnessing a massive federal case unfold in real time. Your Honor, Maya said, returning to her seat with calm authority, I request that this court recognize the federal jurisdiction of this matter and notify the United States Attorney's Office that perjury charges should be filed against Officer Carter immediately. Judge Morrison sat in stunned silence for a moment before speaking. Dr. Richardson, this court recognizes your federal authority. Officer Carter, you have just committed perjury against a federal law enforcement officer in my courtroom. This is now a federal matter. Carter slumped in his chair, the full weight of his destruction settling over him. He had thought he was lying about some random black woman. Instead, he had just handed the Department of Justice everything they needed to destroy him completely. The small municipal traffic case had just become a federal constitutional rights prosecution. Your Honor, Maya announced, rising from her seat with federal authority, as the victim of Officer Carter's perjury and the investigating federal officer in this civil rights case, I request permission to cross-examine the witness under federal jurisdiction. Judge Morrison nodded gravely. Given the extraordinary circumstances, Dr. Richardson, you may proceed. Carter watched in horror as the woman he had tried to destroy approached him with the calm confidence of a federal prosecutor. His hands trembled as she opened a thick federal case file and placed it on the podium directly in front of him. Officer Carter, Maya began, her voice carrying the weight of federal law enforcement, you are still under oath. Do you understand that perjury against a federal officer is a felony punishable by up to 5 years in federal prison? Yes, Carter stammered, his earlier arrogance completely evaporating. Good. Now you testified under oath that I threatened you during our traffic stop. That was a lie, wasn't it? Carter's lawyer started to object, but Maya cut him off. Your Honor, I'm conducting a federal investigation. This witness has already committed perjury against a federal officer. Answer the question, Officer Carter, Judge Morrison ordered. I may have misremembered some details, Carter mumbled. Misremembered? Maya's voice sharpened. Officer Carter, you swore under oath that I lunged toward what you believed was a weapon. Federal surveillance footage proves I never moved my hands from the steering wheel. That wasn't a misremembering. That was perjury. She opened the federal file and pulled out a thick stack of documents. Officer Carter, are you familiar with the federal database of police misconduct complaints? Objection, the prosecutor called out. Relevance. Your Honor, Maya replied calmly. This witness has committed systematic perjury as part of a pattern of constitutional violations. The federal investigation reveals the scope of his criminal behavior. Overruled. Continue, Dr. Richardson. Maya turned back to Carter, who was now visibly sweating. Officer Carter, according to federal records, you have filed false reports in 49 cases over the past 4 years, all involving black citizens, all containing fabricated evidence, all supported by perjured testimony. The courtroom fell silent, except for the sound of Carter's labored breathing. Let me read from your report dated August 7th, 2024, Maya continued, pulling out another document. You claimed Mrs. Eleanor Davis became belligerent and threatened physical violence, but church security footage shows she never raised her voice. Another lie under oath, wasn't it? I don't remember that specific case, Carter whispered. How about February 18th, 2024? You testified that Mr. James Robinson resisted arrest and attempted to flee, but federal review of the body camera footage shows he complied fully with all commands. Another fabrication. Officer Carter. Carter's partner, Officer Thompson, slowly stood up and walked out of the courtroom, clearly distancing himself from the unfolding federal disaster. Officer Carter, Maya pressed forward relentlessly. Federal analysis of your reports shows a consistent pattern. Every time you encounter a black citizen in an affluent neighborhood, you fabricate evidence of criminal behavior. Then you commit perjury in court to support your false reports. Isn't that accurate? I just do my job, Carter stammered weakly. Your job? Maya's voice rose with controlled fury. Your job is to fabricate evidence? Your job is to commit perjury against innocent citizens? Your job is to violate the constitutional rights of people based on their race? The gallery erupted in angry murmurs. Several community members who had suffered similar treatment began speaking up from their seats. Federal investigators have documented 19 separate instances where you lied under oath about black citizens, Maya continued, her federal authority filling the courtroom. Each lie was designed to destroy innocent people's lives. Each act of perjury was a federal crime. Carter broke completely. People need to respect authority. Some people think they're better than others because of where they live. So you decided to teach them lessons by fabricating criminal charges and committing perjury? Maya demanded. I never meant for it to go this far, Carter whispered, finally admitting his guilt. Officer Carter, Maya said with finality, you have just confessed to systematic perjury and constitutional violations against multiple citizens. As a federal law enforcement officer, I am placing you under federal investigation for conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law. She turned to Judge Morrison. Your Honor, this witness has confessed to systematic perjury. I recommend immediate notification of federal authorities and suspension of Officer Carter pending federal criminal charges. Carter slumped in his chair, destroyed. His career was over, his freedom was in jeopardy, and his lies had just become evidence in a federal civil rights case that would destroy his entire department. The federal government had finally caught up with his systematic corruption. Judge Morrison called for a brief recess to consult with federal authorities and the district attorney's office. When the court reconvened, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Word had spread throughout the courthouse that a federal civil rights case was unfolding in real time. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Judge Morrison began solemnly, you have witnessed extraordinary testimony today. Before we proceed to closing arguments, I want to address the federal implications of what has occurred in this courtroom. He turned to Carter, who sat slumped in his chair like a broken man. Officer Carter, you have confessed under oath to systematic perjury and constitutional violations. I am immediately notifying the United States Attorney's Office of your admissions. You are hereby suspended from all law enforcement duties pending federal investigation. Carter's badge and weapon were collected by court security as he sat in stunned silence, the weight of his federal crimes crushing down on him. Dr. Richardson, Judge Morrison continued, as the investigating federal officer and the victim of Officer Carter's perjury, would you like to present a closing statement to this court? Maya rose with quiet dignity, carrying herself with the full authority of the Department of Justice. She approached the jury with the confidence of someone who had prosecuted corruption at the highest levels of government. Members of the jury, she began, her voice carrying throughout the packed courtroom. You have witnessed something extraordinary today. You have seen systematic corruption exposed by the light of federal accountability. She gestured toward Carter without looking at him. Officer Carter didn't just lie about a traffic stop. He committed perjury against a federal law enforcement officer conducting an official civil rights investigation. But more importantly, you've learned that his lies today were part of a pattern spanning years and dozens of victims. The jury hung on every word as she continued. For 4 years, Officer Carter has been weaponizing false testimony against black citizens. He would fabricate criminal behavior, file false reports, then commit perjury in courtrooms just like this one to destroy innocent people's lives. Maya walked to the evidence table and picked up the federal investigation files. 49 documented cases of false reports, 19 instances of perjury under oath. Systematic constitutional violations designed to terrorize citizens based on their race and economic status. Several jury members shook their heads in disgust as the scope of Carter's crimes became clear. Officer Carter thought he could lie about me because he saw a black woman who wouldn't be believed over a decorated police officer. Maya continued, her voice growing stronger. He didn't know that his victim carried federal law enforcement authority. He didn't know that every lie he told was being documented for a federal civil rights prosecution. She turned to face the gallery, where community members who had suffered Carter's abuse sat with tears in their eyes. But I wasn't his only victim. Mrs. Davis is here. Mr. Robinson is here. 19 other citizens are here today because they want justice for the lies that destroyed their reputations, cost them jobs, and traumatized their families. The prosecutor sat in stunned silence, knowing his case had completely collapsed. There was no defense for documented, confessed perjury against a federal officer. Members of the jury, Maya said, returning her attention to them. Perjury isn't just lying. Perjury is the weapon that corrupt officials use to destroy justice itself. When a police officer lies under oath, he doesn't just attack his victim. He attacks the entire foundation of our legal system. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the courtroom. Today, you've seen what happens when federal oversight meets local corruption. Officer Carter's lies have been exposed, his pattern of abuse has been documented, and his criminal behavior will face federal prosecution. Judge Morrison nodded approvingly as Maya delivered her final points with prosecutorial precision. The evidence is overwhelming. Officer Carter committed perjury against me, against Mrs. Davis, against Mr. Robinson, and against every citizen whose lives he destroyed with false testimony. Federal law is clear. Systematic perjury and constitutional violations are serious federal crimes. She looked directly at Carter for the first time. Officer Carter, your badge didn't give you the right to lie. Your uniform didn't give you the authority to fabricate evidence. And your 15 years of service don't excuse 4 years of federal crimes. Turning back to the jury, Maya concluded with quiet authority. Members of the jury, justice isn't just about this courtroom today. Justice is about ensuring that no other citizen suffers what I suffered, what Mrs. Davis suffered, what 19 other victims suffered at the hands of Officer Carter's systematic lies. The jury deliberated for less than 30 minutes. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous. not guilty on all charges against Dr. Maya Richardson. But the real justice came moments later when federal marshals entered the courtroom with arrest warrants. "Officer Carter," the lead marshal announced, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law, systematic perjury, and obstruction of justice. These are federal charges." As Carter was led away in handcuffs, the gallery erupted in applause. Community members who had suffered his abuse for years finally saw justice served by federal authority. Judge Morrison banged his gavel for order. "This court finds that Officer Carter committed systematic perjury and constitutional violations. The federal investigation will continue, and additional charges may be forthcoming." Maya packed her federal case files with quiet satisfaction. Carter's lies had finally caught up with him, and federal justice would ensure he never abused his badge again. Outside the courthouse, news cameras captured Carter's arrest as he was loaded into a federal transport vehicle. His career was over, his freedom was gone, and his systematic corruption had been exposed for the world to see. Federal accountability had won. 6 months later, the transformation was complete. The courthouse that had once protected Officer Carter's lies now displayed a federal consent decree mandating systematic reforms throughout the entire police department. What had begun as one man's perjury had exposed a culture of corruption that reached every level of local law enforcement. Carter sat in federal prison, serving a 5-year sentence for conspiracy to violate civil rights, systematic perjury, and obstruction of justice. His pension was revoked, his law enforcement certification permanently stripped, and his name had become synonymous with police corruption throughout the region. The decorated officer who had built his career on lies was now a cautionary tale about federal accountability. But Carter wasn't alone. The federal investigation that Dr. Maya Richardson had initiated led to charges against 9 additional officers, 4 supervisors, and the police chief who had covered up years of false reports. The Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division had transformed a local traffic case into a comprehensive examination of systematic abuse. Dr. Richardson stood at the podium of the National Civil Rights Conference, addressing an audience of federal prosecutors, civil rights attorneys, and community activists from across the country. Her case had become a model for how federal oversight could dismantle local corruption and protect citizens' constitutional rights. "When Officer Carter committed perjury against me," she told the packed auditorium, "he thought he was destroying one woman's credibility. Instead, he handed federal investigators the evidence we needed to expose systematic constitutional violations affecting dozens of innocent citizens." The audience erupted in applause as she continued. "Truth doesn't fear investigation. Lies do. And when public officials weaponize false testimony against citizens, federal law ensures that justice will prevail." Her son, Marcus, watched proudly from the front row as his mother received the Department of Justice's highest commendation for integrity and service. The woman who had been humiliated and lied about in a small municipal courthouse had become a national symbol of federal accountability and civil rights protection. The police department that had once protected Carter's corruption now operated under strict federal oversight. Body cameras were mandatory and tamper-proof. All arrests required independent verification. Officers received federal civil rights training, and any complaint of false reporting triggered automatic federal review. Mrs. Davis, whose own encounter with Carter's lies had been vindicated, approached Dr. Richardson after the ceremony. "Thank you for showing us that federal justice still exists," she said with tears in her eyes. "You saved our community from years more of his abuse." Community members who had suffered Carter's systematic lies found their voices again. 19 victims who had been silenced by false charges saw their records expunged and received federal compensation for constitutional violations. Their stories, once dismissed as complaints against a decorated officer, were now part of federal court records documenting systematic corruption. Dr. Richardson returned to her federal work with renewed purpose, knowing that one moment of revealed truth had protected countless future victims from police perjury and civil rights abuse. The message was clear. When authority figures lie under oath, federal oversight ensures accountability. When local corruption tries to silence citizens, federal law provides protection. And when systematic abuse threatens constitutional rights, federal justice delivers consequences. If this story moved you, hit that like button and let the Winds of Thought community know you stand for federal accountability. Share this with someone who needs to hear that truth always defeats systematic lies. Subscribe, because we bring you stories where justice prevails over corruption, where federal oversight protects constitutional rights, and where one person's courage can dismantle an entire system of abuse. Remember, heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they carry federal badges and the courage to expose systematic lies, one perjury charge at a time. The story you heard today wasn't cleaned up. It was told exactly as it happened. Every week, Winds of Thought bring you voices that refuse to be silenced. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when justice gets served.